We're rolling, and so glad to have you here, Jen. Tell our audience, where exactly you are, what's happening in your city, and give us an update.
Cool. Yeah. So I am based in London, despite being an American. And yeah, we're actually getting some good sunshine today. For anyone who's ever had any dealings with a Brit, they love to talk about the weather. So we normally get gray skies and a bit of rain, but yeah, we've been having a nice couple of sunshiny days.
That sounds really fun. Actually, I think London is one of the best places on earth, right? And which part exactly in London are you currently residing in?
Yeah, so I live in central London, in a little area called Chelsea's Imperial Wharf, right on the water. It's for anyone who knows London, it's a bit of a where is that kind of a place? It's a little hidden gem between Chelsea and Fulham.
Sounds like, all the, my favorite English Premier League clubs are all popping up in my mind right now. Fulham, Chelsea, Arsenal. But of course, I'm a big fan of football, of English football. Are you a supporter of any English team as well?
Yeah, so coincidentally, I was introduced to Premier League football many, many, many years ago. And the team that I was told I was to support was Chelsea. And coincidentally, Stamford Bridge, where Chelsea play, is less than a 10-minute walk from where I live.
Wow. Because I'm a huge fan of Liverpool. Recently, some of our fans, our fellow Reds, right, actually drove a truck to the front of Stamford Bridge Stadium. And, the truck has a huge signage that says English Premier League champions 2019-2020. So that was quite a laugh, for a lot of us, around the world who saw that scenes unfolded right there in Stamford Bridge. So, well, enough of this football talk. This show is about marketers, brand marketing, SEO, leadership, and of course, you bring in a lot of interesting topics. I've been following you on LinkedIn for quite a while. Many of your posts are really compelling. I think this is a great vehicle for us to maybe chat about some of the things you have posted there and find out more about, what you do. I think for a start, I understand you recently transitioned from this amazing company, DeepCrawl, right, as a marketing director. Now you're a VP of marketing in another company in a totally new industry. So tell us how the transition has been for you so far.
Well, it's definitely been interesting. When I made the decision to move over to Banked, first and foremost, Banked is in the fintech sector. So I historically have always worked inside of MarTech or marketing technology, specifically within SEO tools and platforms. So making the decision to move into the fintech industry was a big one for me. The decision, I think, was more so backed and driven by the fact that I really wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to, learn kind of the consumer market. What Banked does is it is B2B, but it's also B2C in the same regard. So I've never actually tested my hand directly at B2C marketing. I will completely admit that one. So the allure of that was really enticing. It's a very early stage fintech. And so I have come in at the very, very ground level. The two kind of key figureheads at the organization, the CEO and the COO, are really building something absolutely monumental. And the term that they use to describe the trajectory of the company is the company is a rocket ship and we're getting ready to set flight. And what these two guys are trying to accomplish inside of the fintech space, a la the open banking and the faster payments network initiatives here in the UK in the last couple of years, is really try and take on the likes of the Visas, the MasterCards, and the American Expresses of the world in the payment sector. The way in which they're doing it, though, is it's making a choice, an ethical choice, when you're making a payment at checkout for your e-commerce or your in-store point of sale payment or whatever the case may be is. But they're doing it with the back-end infrastructure of today's digital technology, as opposed to the existing card rail platforms that were built 40, 50, 60 years ago. And so what they're now having to do is bolt on new technology to an old infrastructure.
Wow, I think that's a really fascinating and really exciting new industry to be at. I think you spent your entire career, if I'm not wrong, in SaaS marketing, right? At least for the last 3 years with DeepCrawl. So, transitioning and making the leap into this new industry, what has been a challenge for you so far? And maybe, you have some new experiences to share with us already. I think it was only like 6 months ago that you made the leap, right, into this new industry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was earlier in the year, coincidentally, right at, I think, the day of lockdown here in the UK. So there's a whole bunch of challenges that were presenting themselves. So obviously, it's a brand new startup. So it's building the entire infrastructure. It's devising the marketing strategy from the ground up. It's helping to formulate what the culture is going to look like for the organization as it grows. But then also, too, the complexity of I need to now learn a brand new industry. I need to figure out who the key players are. I need to figure out who the influencers are. I need to figure out what top publications I should be following and reading and making sure that I'm staying up to speed with the fast pace of this industry, because it moves just as quickly as digital marketing industry does. And so I'm doing both of those things. And then you've got the global pandemic and lockdown. So technically, I've not even met a large majority of my work colleagues, with the exception of Zoom calls. So, you're now coming into this environment where you've got to learn how to work with these people, but you've got to learn how to work with these people in a very remote fashion, which is something that I think there's a large chunk of people experience day to day, those that are like the Aleda Solises and the remote workers, the digital nomads. But then a large percentage of our workforce, we're accustomed to day-to-day office life, right? So you get a better sense of your work colleagues when you sit with them face to face. You can read their facial expressions, you can read their body language, you get a stronger sense of who they are as people. So those three things, I think, all within their own right, but collectively have posed great challenges, I think, to date. But it's been very positive and fun challenges, I will say.
That must be really, different because, I can imagine in the past when I was switching companies, right, or switching roles, first day or the first month is always about, figuring out where to sit in the office and, finding out who are your allies, during the first week and who to go to lunch with, right? So
Yeah.
you have a chance to do that, and it's all just Zoom meetings for you so far. It must be a really unique experience. But of course, change is constant, even, in these times, right, where everything is so unpredictable. We have to embrace such a challenge and just move on with it, right? So I'm going to ask you next, in terms of you spend your career in SaaS marketing, so you have a lot of know-how and tips for the CMOs and, of course, the senior marketing leaders who are tuning in. In terms of, making this leap as well into this new industry, are there different things or different tasks that now you're embarking on compared to what you used to do, which is purely SaaS marketing?
Yeah. So obviously your business metrics and your commercial models are going to be fundamentally different when you're driving a subscription or a SaaS-based business versus when you're dealing with a transaction-based business, right? And I think that is the first thing, first and foremost. So the secondary thing as well is that inside of the fintech space, I mean, you're dealing with a lot of regulation that you don't see inside of SaaS businesses. Inside of SaaS businesses, everyone and anyone has the abilities of literally coding, developing, and building a SaaS product and putting it out to market with very little barriers to entry from a regulatory perspective. But when you move into the fintech world and you start playing in that space, it's heavily regulated because you're dealing with people's finances, whether or not it's a corporation's finances or an individual consumer's finances. So the regulatory restrictions are quite interesting to see how they actually spill over into a marketing capacity. So I've really worked quite closely with our head of operations and compliance to make sure that everything that we're doing is compliant against the FCA and regulatory compliance for us as a business. So that takes, I think, utmost priority because our business doesn't function and we can't succeed without the regulatory certifications and licenses that we've had to acquire. So if those go away, we have no business. In SaaS, you don't have that same level of pressure. And again, you don't have that same level of regulatory body, if you will, on a broad scale.
That's fantastic. I think it's really insightful. In terms of, for those listeners who are tuning purely for the SaaS, component of this show, can you maybe give us some your hot take on the commercial focus of SaaS marketing, right? How to do it right and how to make your marketing sassy, right? And what do you have lined up for the future for your new journey that you're making now with Banked?
Yeah. So coincidentally, I think the Twitter bio of my last company was we put the SaaS in SaaS. And it meant SaaS as in sassy, in SaaS, the product, software as a service. And the community manager that I hired over there, Jennifer Hoffman, she absolutely is brilliant in being able to execute that SaaS and SaaS. And I think like when you're taking a look at SaaS metrics, it's all about scalability. It's all about a numbers game. And what does your lead funnel and model look like? You've got some SaaS models that are enterprise sales focused, where it is revolved around a subscription model, monthly basis. But those metrics and those numbers are going to be much different than when you're talking about a pure play SaaS, where it's an auto sign up, auto onboarded. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like I said, it's a numbers game with SaaS. It's how quickly can you scale those numbers? How well can you optimize the conversion metrics from one phase of that funnel to the next? I think that's pretty much, I think, with SaaS. It is a hard numbers game there. Whereas I think inside of the current fintech space that I've been looking at, it's less about those hard revenue metric numbers, and it's more about scalability and the capacity of market share for usability, number of users who are adopting your product on a regular basis. And then also too, the interesting thing that I found is brands. So inside of the fintech space, you have a lot of dare I say this? Fintech is now the fun side of banking, if that makes sense. It's the fun side of finance. You've got fintechs such as Klarna, for example. You've also got the likes of Monzo, for example, and they're now coming forward with these big, bold brands that are colorful. They're statement making. They're emotional. They evoke emotions inside of their users. And so you see that now in fintech that you haven't historically seen in finance and banking, that I think has always been true for SaaS. It's always been fun. It's always been sassy. The brand has always had a very strong personality. So for me, I think that's been interesting to see the dynamic between the two there.
That's fantastic. We're going to move on quickly and talk about the importance of diversity in teams, because we know you built many brilliant teams previously. And of course, dealing with labels as well, right? Negatively at workplaces is pretty common, especially for female leaders. So this is a topic that many of our female listeners are tuning in for. Maybe we want to get some of your hot take on that, especially. Recently, there's a study that has revealed that companies with greater numbers of female executive committee members, they bring in 10 times greater profit. So what's the reaction after looking at a study like that? Do you agree with it? I'm sure you agree with it, right?
How can I not agree with that? As you said, I've built some fantastic teams historically, and so I 100% speak to that. The experience that I've personally had in building those teams, I've been able to see the output and the productivity. And more importantly, I've been able to see the impact that those teams have had on that bottom line from a growth perspective, right? So me and my historical teams are prime proof and prime example that 10x absolutely it's a great stat and it's a great figure to see. And, I am absolutely really enjoying so many large scale publications bringing this topic to light more and more lately, but it also leaves me with a sentiment of frustration. Whereas we're in 2020 and we still have such a large gap inside of the pay scale between men and women. We still have, even larger gaps when you get into things such as minority women workers versus, men. And I think that as great as it is to see more and more this being a prevalent topic of conversation, it's still frustrating that it's 2020 and we're still talking about this, that we don't have, pay equality across the board.
This is great. And we're going to also look at maybe or identify, some of your favorite brands that maybe are dealing with diversity, also standing behind decisions like, for example, regardless of possible backlash or negativity, especially with recent, developments and movements, right? Like Black Lives Matter. So like equality, social justice movements and all that. What are some of the brands that you can maybe tell us that are doing it right and really nailing it in terms of pushing these forward?
Well, first and foremost, I just want to say, huge shout out to Jay Herman that you had on the podcast a few episodes ago. She absolutely smashed this whole topic out of the park. It was a brilliant podcast. But I think when you really take a look at what's happening right now and you take a look at the way that brands are approaching it. So I've been very fortunate to be on a couple of calls with some really large CMOs across the world talking about, how are we to tackle this as CMOs? I mean, we kind of sit at the helm of our organization, being the ones that are public facing and devising the plan as to how we address not only our customers, but the extent of our whole community as this is kind of going on around us, and how do we pivot and how do we sort of be the voice of change and help to utilize our platforms for the greater good of humanity and the communities in which we serve, right? And one of the most important things that I think really resonated with me and that I took away from it is just having a sense about empathy, putting your organization's agenda on the back burner when it comes to your product, your services, your own brand growth. Put it on the back burner because we need to utilize our platforms again for empathy, utilizing our voices to make sure that those whose voices have not been heard or have intentionally been muted historically, we can now be their voice for them, or at least provide the platform for them to speak their voice. And anyone who knows me knows that this is my hands down, end all, be all favorite example brands to use, because I think that they nail it 100% of the time, and it's Nike. And anyone who has followed Nike over the past couple of years will know that Colin Kaepernick, an American football player for the San Francisco 49ers, he is mixed race, and he decided to take a stand, or actually, should I say, take a knee, and to really try and, peacefully protest the fact that his voice and the voice of other Black Americans in the U.S., Black and brown Americans in the U.S., and predominantly football players was not being heard, that they were being mistreated. And Nike, when Colin Kaepernick started getting a lot of backlash, especially from the federal government in the U.S., Nike took a stand and said, you know what, we're going to back him. We're going to double down. We're actually going to create a campaign around Colin Kaepernick to help not only give him a larger platform, but to also help amplify the voice and the message. And I think if you followed that story, then you'll see that people took to burning their Nikes. People immediately were up in arms about it. But at the end of the day, what ended up happening is that after a slight crash in Nike stock, their stock catastrophically skyrocketed. And Nike was way ahead of the current movement right now of Black Lives Matter. Nike set the precedent. Nike is always setting the precedent when it comes to backing the values, backing the missions, backing the things that resonate with them as an organization. And somebody that I also follow quite closely is Mayur Gupta, the former CMO over at Freshly. And I was listening to a podcast last week where he said this, and he is constantly saying this, but purpose-driven brands are what resonate with consumers these days. You have to decide what your purpose is. You have to decide what you stand for as an organization, and you have to double down behind that. And I think that our current global conversation that's being had around equality and around the Black Lives Matter movement, is its prime example. to see which brands are using their platform to double down and make sure that they are speaking up for what they stand for, and the other brands that unfortunately are just remaining silent because they don't want to get political. So for me, again, Nike, it's my end all be all, but it's very interesting again to see which brands standing up for their purpose and what they believe is right and true, and the brands that again are staying quiet.
I think you're nailed it in the head when it comes to purpose-driven businesses and brands that are showing real brand values, right? And also the way to communicate a message and ensuring all these not just across all the product and marketing messages, but in the entire organizations as well. I remember you were posting something on LinkedIn about how you were applauding other brands like Delta Airlines and Gymshark as well. Tell us, why these are also brands that deserve, the accolades for nailing or crushing it when it comes to purpose-driven business.
Yeah. So I guess I'm a little bit biased with Delta. I've been a Delta customer for as long as I can possibly imagine. But the reason being is that Delta has always had customer experience as the utmost important and the sort of heartbeat as to what they do and who they are as an organization. So what Delta did in the post that you're specifically referencing is the CEO of Delta, Ed Bastian, came out and he said, look, we're in a global pandemic. So if you refuse to wear a mask on one of our flights and choose to endanger not only our customers, but our staff, we would politely like to ask you to never fly our airline. And they've taken drastic measures to make sure that they're keeping all of their staff and all of their customers safe in that regard. And
it's a lot of balls to come out and say something like that to customers, right?
Yeah. And that is the thing. Like, we right now, as brands, have the abilities of drawing that line in the sand, because this is what our customers want to see. There's a lot of studies and a lot of statistics that just consistently are coming out around millennial buying behaviors. Millennials now are being driven to purchase from brands that align with their own personal morals, values, and beliefs. I mean, the level of buying power that both Gen Z, millennials, and Gen X have right now is incredible. So if you as an organization aren't doubling down on the values and drawing the line in the sand as to where you stand, I think that you're running the risk of really losing a lot of customers, and especially the customers that have the most buying power in today's day and age. And that's only going to increase as they get older and as they move up in the professional levels of their careers.
This is amazing. And I think from one of your LinkedIn posts, I found out about Gymshark, how that team, has actually identified someone on the streets of the Bronx in New York. This person was basically, out on the streets with his friends, cleaning up the streets after the violence that had broken out the night before during the riots, right? So he was wearing a Gymshark hoodie, and what the Gymshark team did was that they did some digging and they managed to find his account on Gymshark.com. So they refunded all of his orders since 2018. That is something that brands can do. The kind of spirit that we want in our community as well, right?
And that is what it is, right? And it's inspiring and delighting your customers. It is, making sure that they understand the level of appreciation that you as a brand have for them, right? And also too, in that act of refunding that gentleman's previous purchases, what Gymshark did was they doubled down and said, we support this movement. It was a small gesture in the grand scheme of things when you take a look at it. But when you really stop and you think about the effort that they went through in order to identify who that gentleman was, it shows that Gymshark is going to go that extra mile for their customers, and not just, in this one particular instance, but in every single opportunity that they possibly can in order to inspire and delight their customers. I was just absolutely loving that one from Gymshark. I applaud it. They saw a gentleman in a photo from New York. Gymshark, for anyone who doesn't know, is UK based. So they really went to extreme lengths in order to make that one happen.
Shout out to Gymshark and their team, and hopefully one of these days I can get one of their leadership to come onto the show as well, and then we can maybe speak more about their intent, on rewarding their customers, in such a big way. So we're going to move on with a question that's submitted by one of our community listeners who is watching this live right now on Twitch. Danny has this question for you, Jennifer. How did you move from manager to director and now VP in a marketing organization? Did changing companies help, or were you promoted internally?
So there's a few step changes in there, obviously, a few career steps. So when I moved from a manager level into a director level, I was actually inside of the same company. I moved inside of the same company, which is a former MarTech SaaS platform, about 3 or 4, if I recall correctly, sort of pay rises and promotions inside of that organization just based off of the work that I was doing. And so that was really fun and that was really exciting. And I was just like massively flourishing and growing inside of this organization, which was fantastic. I joined that organization to help the leadership team drive it through to acquisition. Post-acquisition, I was retained a little bit longer, and then I decided to leave for a new challenge. So yeah, like I said, there were 3 or 4 opportunities there for me to see that promotion. And it was just trying to learn and absorb absolutely everything I could, learn from those around me, learn from those who are more senior than I am. And anyone who knows me as well knows I'm an avid reader. Like, I consume books at a ridiculously fast pace. And I'm always intrigued by the psychology of marketing, business development, building cultures, things like that. So anything that could help me grow inside of my career, my craft. And then I left and I moved to what is now my former company. And I moved in at the same level, so as a director level. And yeah, I basically stayed at that same level. Unfortunately, never was able to see a promotion there. And you might have seen it on my LinkedIn post as well. I've actually written a blog post or a Medium post about the sort of, how to put this politely, kind of about the frustrations that I experienced as a female in a working environment who was told, no, you can't have a promotion because you're too aggressive, or you're too difficult, or you're too bold. Naturally
into the next question for you, in fact, on being labeled aggressive, bossy, difficult, awkward, or too much. These are the labels, that people, when they criticize, right, they normally, assign these labels to people. Sometimes I've actually been, labeled certain things as well in my career. So why you couldn't be more proud of who you are and what you have accomplished?
Oh, I couldn't be more proud of myself and what I've accomplished. I mean, yeah, when I think back to everything that I've been through in my life to get myself to the position that I'm in right now, I absolutely am very proud of that. Like, don't get me wrong, but to the point I was just saying, that's when I decided, you know what, I deserve it. And so if you're not going to give it to me, here is my resignation. And that is what happened. If all of the men who want to sit at the top want to label me bossy and aggressive, then fair play to you, but you're now going to lose a massive asset inside of your organization. It's one of the reasons why I've been so keen in championing the younger generations, but more importantly, women in the younger generations who are coming up in marketing or in SEO or whatever the case may be is. And for anyone listening, my LinkedIn DMs are always open. My Twitter DMs are always open. I have infinite amount of time for women who are looking for career advice to help them get to the next level, because quite frankly, it frustrates me to no avail to hear women time after time after time express frustration and irritation and just sheer sadness and anger because they've been labeled these things, or they've been blocked inside of their career development, or there's just this sort of societal norm of oppression of women who come out and they're bold and they know what they want and they know where they're going with their career. And again, to that point, we get labeled bossy, we get labeled aggressive, we get labeled difficult. But if I were a male, I would be called a leader. It would be said about me that I was ambitious. It would be said about me that I had all of these positive attributes to run a business. And So for me, I think my only regret is that I didn't make the decision sooner to leave the place I was in, but I was in a little bit of an emotional place because I was very much attached to my team. We were flying, we were loving life, we really enjoyed each other's company, we were doing some really amazing things, and so I stayed for that reason. But I knew at the end of it that I wasn't setting the right example as a female in a management and a leadership position if I stayed. And that's kind of why I decided to go public with my experience, and hoped that it would empower some other women who were also trying to strive to the next level of their career to take a stand and have the confidence in themselves that they are as valuable to that organization as anyone else in that organization. So if you aren't getting the appreciation and you aren't getting the respect that you're due, I know it's hard and not everyone can do it, but draw that line in the sand and decide that you want better for yourself and for your career.
This is brilliant. So I think going public and communicating it is always the right thing to do. And of course, also very empowering as well to others who are, hearing it. So I think mental health awareness is another topic that not prominently discussed, in the workplace, especially until just recently, right? So I think who better than you, to ask you this question on your take on how HR and marketing can actually promote mental health. This is what happened a few hours before we went on live, right? I was looking on my news feed and back to the earlier when we talked a little bit about football, right? The manager and coach of Liverpool Football Club, Jurgen Klopp, and his player Andy Robertson, they were actually on a video talking about mental health and about their struggles, during the lockdown. About things like, they were doing so well in the league and there was a possibility that they will cancel and suspend or even forfeit the whole championship. And they were talking, very candidly, about the kind of struggles they face as players as well. Like it's not just the defeats that, really brings them down. There are other issues like maybe relationship or family issues. There's also the problems dealing with injuries as well. So in the workplace, there are all kinds of mental health issues that could actually, affect individuals. So maybe can you tell us how can HR and marketing actually promote mental health?
Well, I think first and foremost, to your point, right? It's a topic that's really only been brought into the forefront or into the light as of recently. Mental health was always a taboo subject where, you didn't really talk about it because it was foreseen as to be a weakness, especially inside of a professional working environment. And so I think that we can't address a problem until we have a discussion or acknowledge the fact that the problem exists, right? And to your point as well around the conversation with the footballers is that there are so many other areas that we deal with as individuals in our day-to-day lives that also impact our working environments. So if we as organizations and as businesses don't help address this with the individuals that are part of our companies and our organizations, then I think that we're doing a disservice to our employees. We hire individuals who come to our companies because they bring their background, their experiences, and everything that makes them to the table every single day. And that's what makes them brilliant at their craft. So if we can't help support them, then again, we're doing them a disservice. And we can't expect them to also perform at their best if they're worried about their mental health, if they're struggling with mental health, right? So when I think about marketing, and I think a lot of people, when they think about marketing, they think about external marketing, right? They think about all of the content marketing and the social marketing and the brand marketing and performance marketing and everything external to speak to community and target prospects and customers. But I also think that marketing plays a very important role for internal marketing and inside of an organization. Marketers have these skill sets where we have the capabilities of delivering a really sound and solid emotional message. So why not utilize those same skill sets internally to help support certain initiatives and align with the likes of, as you said, HR, to make sure that our staff and our employees feel as though we're here to support them as much as we ask them to support our businesses. And I think that this is something that I really feel incredibly strongly about when it comes to leadership. You can be a single leader, but leadership as a whole across the board inside of an organization needs to be supportive of its employees. And mental health is a very, very important aspect of that. I've experienced staff historically that have struggled with mental health. And, you as that leader, you as that manager, you have to take them on a one-to-one basis, and you have to work with them and make sure that they feel comfortable and safe, not just in a physical sense, but in a psychological sense, that their job isn't on the line because they suffer from these situations.
This is fantastic. And I think adding to your point, right, as marketers, we love to tell stories, right? So we can use storytelling to sell mental health benefits, right? And so the power of storytelling is such that you can solve HR's problems, and problem can benefit from a storytelling a strategy as well, to see like our co-workers and our leaders, like, Jurgen Klopp of Liverpool Football Club, openly discuss mental health is a key step in dissolving stigma. And it's unimaginable to see the power of a CEO or a CMO sharing their experience in counseling. I think that's really powerful. And if the leaders are like you, are brave enough to share, the impact can be really monumental.
Yeah. And I think to that point as well, like it's great also too to have more public facing figures now talking about mental health. It is opening the door to make it okay to be vulnerable about the fact that you do suffer from these things. And to your point, that if you have leaders inside of an organization that allow themselves to also be vulnerable and also to kind of share what they feel might potentially be a weakness, it then makes the employees feel more empowered to also share theirs, which then it becomes this reciprocal sense of sort of help and support across the board inside of your organization. And, this is something else that I'm really, really passionate about is, building strong teams starts with having a strong trust and support system underneath that. Again, there's a lot of statistical data out there and research reports that shows when you have happy and healthy employees, they will absolutely go above and beyond for you and your organization. And you will always have a higher performing team if they feel sound and safe, again, both physically, but also too emotionally and psychologically.
We are almost at the 40th minute mark. So before we let you go, we definitely have to talk about SEO, because it's something that's still very for some businesses, and it's something that is very close to your heart and something you're very passionate about as well. So what is your reaction when you recently read a marketing book, right, that actually says something like this: SEO is still important for some business, but not as many as you might think, unless you have the resources to land amongst the top 3 search terms in your market area. It's a fruitless effort that will be further in parallel by the increasing use of voice search. It's 100% BS, right?
I think it's more than 100%. I mean, if such thing exists, right? So for anyone who saw that on any of my social channels, because I read that in a book, and I was completely enraged, because it's dangerous to the industry of SEO is what it is. You have somebody who is seen as a thought leader, as an authority figure on marketing, and they're coming out with a one-liner. And mind you, that was the only line in their entire book about SEO. And so for somebody who I openly admit this all the time, I'm not an SEO practitioner, but I've spent the last almost 8 years of my life obsessing over the industry of search engine optimization and the people that make it so great every day. So I've been firsthand previous to seeing the benefits and understanding that SEO is not just search rankings in Google. SEO is way more extensive above and beyond that. I mean, you haven't even touched into the area of technical SEO, which is all of your on-page elements. It's all of the technical architecture and makeup of your website. It's schema. It's all of these other aspects. And those aspects also impact your brand. They impact your customer experience. They impact so much for your business. So for this particular individual, and everyone keeps asking me, what's the book and what's the person's name? And I'm trying not to out them, but it was shambolic.
You're just being kind, right?
It was utter BS. It just proved the level of ignorance and the lack of knowledge that this particular person has around the industry of SEO. And if you don't have a sound foundation against a subject matter and you're about to put it on a very exposed public platform, you either should bring in experts or just not say anything at all, because then it has a knock-on impact to those practitioners practicing SEO. And now you've presented a new hurdle and a new problem that they have to overcome, because you've just told however many of your followers and your readers that SEO is not important and that you shouldn't pay attention to it, when ultimately at the end of the day, I'm a true believer, SEO and your site optimization sit to the heart of everything you do when it comes to digital marketing. Like, it is the linchpin for all of your digital marketing success when you think about it.
I think it's a real reflection of current times, right? Where everyone is all about instant gratification. Yeah. Brands, all of them, they just want the here and now. They're impatient, right? That's why, they're impatient when it comes to the building process, when it comes to, treating SEO as a mid to long-term goal. Everyone, is just diving straight into social media, content marketing, TikTok, or basically, putting all the eggs in one basket, or Facebook, for example, or AdWords or things like that. And then they neglect SEO. So it's something that I think is, when I talk to my most admired people who come on the show, they are the SEO experts as well. These are the people who are doing really great and important work. Someone and people that I really admire and pay respect to. So before we let you go, we want to maybe let you have a chance to say some last message to our audience, our listeners, on how you will preach the marketing gospel, right? I understand that your marketing gospel is always about chase your metrics, but put as much, if not more, into building your brand. So I think this is the best way to sign off. Can you tell us about how, by building your brand will reduce costs, increase cost of, lifetime value of customers, and how you will help brands carry through tough times like this pandemic?
Yeah. So that is 100%, I think, my mantra as a marketing professional, is that you have to put the same amount of importance on brand marketing as you do on performance marketing. Obviously, performance marketing is what drives your growth. It's what keeps your staff employed, but your brand marketing is ultimately what's going to carry you through these tough times. It's those brands right now that we're seeing are surviving and thriving through this global pandemic and lockdown because they have that strong sense of brand. They have that strong customer loyalty. Airbnb is a prime example. The travel industry has been catastrophically just decimated during this lockdown. And when you look at Airbnb, they pulled everything back, which was absolutely smart. They actually pivoted not only their marketing strategy, but their business strategy for the short time. And they moved into virtual experiences where you could still experience a place or a different area for travel virtually. They were still bringing something to their customers. And now that restrictions are starting to ease up quite a bit, especially here in Europe, customers are flocking back to Airbnb to now start to book their travel vacations and holidays. And it's because Airbnb put so much emphasis on the brand they were building that it's actually what helped carry them through. So that's why I say, you have to have that strong brand, because if you don't, then your customers are basically going to evaluate you on price. There will be no attachment. There will be no emotional resonance there. But at the same time, too, your brand also needs to be supported with performance marketing, or else, again, you don't have a job because your company can't stay afloat financially.
This is fantastic. I think it's a great way to sign off this show. Thank you so much again. This week, CMO Asia Podcast is bringing so many brilliant guests. And the one with me right now, Jennifer Hoffman, is someone that I always wanted to talk to for the longest time. I'm so excited to finally have you here and sit down and have a chat with you today, regarding all things marketing, brand marketing, SEO, female leadership, how to build high performance teams, and more. It's great to have you here, and I can't wait to have you back on again. So look forward to you coming back onto the show in the future.
I would love that, Wayne. Thank you for having me. Absolutely humbled and honored. I greatly appreciate it. And again, as I said, I would love to be back. And for anyone listening, if there are any questions or thoughts or opinions or advice that's needed, I'm always happy to help someone.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Jennifer Hoffman. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Cheers.